Hi there. This discussion is focused on research framework. Specifically, we will be talking about your theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Now, what is a framework? When I say a framework, it is a structure of the idea or concept and how it is put together. So when we talk about a framework, we are looking into a diagram, we are looking into a schematic presentation as to how this idea would be connected to one another. There are two main types of framework that you will encounter in our research. One, conceptual framework. Conceptual framework is the structure of concepts grouped together as a map for the study. So when I say conceptual framework, it will be the theoretical framework as applied in your own study. So the focus here is your own specific study. In other words, this is the explanation of the variables of the study based on literature and research. Next, you have the term theoretical framework. So when I talk about theoretical framework, this answers the question when the variables have been studied before and have been found to be related to one another. Oftentimes, you would relate your theoretical framework to your existing theories. Think of it that your existing theories came into existence because a study had been conducted by the proponent. There was already a study conducted by the author of the theory, and from that theory, we are anchoring our research. Theory development is usually a concern of students in the doctoral level. Collection of interrelated concepts that exist in the literature. It could be a ready-made map for the study, but may or may not be well worked out. So for example, if you're conducting a study related to behavior, you might want the theory of reasoned action. So the theory of reasoned action would specify that a certain behavior is brought about by several factors. These factors may be true to your results later on, and these factors may not be true to your results later on. Our purpose is that we are leaning into a theory for us to test whether this theory will be true or not. So when we talk about a theoretical framework, it is an explanation or an essay that would interrelate the concept or theories involved in that phenomenon. The purpose of your theory is to have a tentative explanation of the phenomenon that you are having or exploring. Later on, your study will validate whether this tenet, whether this statement of the theory will be accurate or not when it comes to the phenomenon that you are studying. So, when I talk about conceptual framework, your conceptual framework is an application of your theoretical framework as applied in your study. To go further, what do we mean by theory? Your lessons in theoretical foundations of nursing might have reminded you that when I talk about a theory, it would mean beholding spectacle or speculation. It is a theory, it is not a law, meaning it might be true to something, but it might not be true to other situations. So, your theory is basically a set of statements. They are general principles which would explain a phenomenon in a systematic way. For example, we would want to know what are the behaviors of the student in an online education. Then we found out that students tend to be less engaged in online education, for example. So what are the reasons or what are the factors that might have led to this behavior of the students? So you might want to use a theory to explain this. And later on, through your research, prove whether this theory is correct or not. Our theory would have several characteristics. One, it should be consist of a set of concepts. In other words, it does not only focus on a certain concept like knowledge, but it should be able to focus on several concepts. For example, knowledge, behavior, attitude, and practices. So it is also consist of prepositions. When I talk about prepositions, these are statement or assertion of the relationship between concepts derived from theories or generalizations based on empirical or factual data. Now, keywords to highlight. It is a statement or assertion of the relationship. The theory would state what is the relationship of the first variable to the second variable, or the first concept to the second concept. And this preposition is derived from previous theories. It could be that the present theory is working on old theories, let's say, for example, that of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that could also be anchored to Florence Nightingale theory of environment or environmental nursing theory. And these relationships are being generalized based on empirical or factual data. Take, for example, Florence Nightingale's theory. Florence Nightingale did not come up with the theory just through a dream. Florence Nightingale did the research, she did data gathering for her to come up with this theory. So when I say theory, these are consist of prepositions. In your way to search for a theory, okay, or in your way to seek explanation to your variables under study, you might find out that you are only interested to a certain preposition, but not interested on the whole theory itself. This reminds us that you should be able to state that specific preposition that is relevant to your research. Now, what are the purpose of theories? There are a lot of existing knowledges, and one of its purpose is to summarize existing knowledge. Second, it would attempt to explain or interpret observations. Third, to predict and control outcomes. And fourth is to stimulate the effort of making new discoveries. So basically, when we are looking into a theory, we are also answering the question, what is the knowledge available to us pertinent to your research? Or what could be the possible explanation why people in the community are not utilizing the maternal and child health services? What is the reason why there is an increase of birth rate at present? Or what is the reason why family planning resources are underutilized during the time of pandemic? It will be your theories who will attempt to explain this generally. But your goal as a researcher is to find a specific explanation as to how this come into an event. Now, what are the importance of theory in nursing practice? It would be inclined on the previous slide. It would describe, predict, control, and explain a phenomenon. Because in research, our goal is to describe and explain a phenomenon. How come this is occurring? What is the reason behind this? Next, validate, enhance, and improve practice. When I say validate practice, we might be practicing this since our old nurses or nurses before us have taught us about this. But the question is this really effective? Is this really efficient? It will be the theory tested through research that will be able to answer that question. Next, it also promotes explanation and understanding of a phenomenon and gives rise to a body of knowledge. Now, it also follows logical progression and contributes to nursing autonomy and identity. Without our nursing theories, we might not have been recognized as a separate or independent profession. It is our nursing theories that makes us different from other healthcare professions. It is intrinsic to practice, and practice continues to validate theory. Although theory would try to explain practice, your practice is also being validated by your theory, and your practice also validates the theory. They're integral to one another, so one could not exist without the other. Although some of us might say, oh, I'm not interested into theories, I don't want to learn theories. Day and day, you're practicing these theories. Day and day, you are living through the theories. Now, what are the roles or functions of your theories? It would make research more productive. Because you're already guided by a set of prepositions, you would know where you will be going to. You would know if there are options available to us to measure a specific data. And you will be building up on previous evidences. Creation of evidences would be vital if it is building up already. Okay, creation of new evidences might be necessary, but when we are creating new evidences, we need to know what's already known before we create a new one. And if we are embarking on theories, we are supporting existing knowledge, which makes the knowledge base stronger. Next, it also organizes unsorted facts, laws, concepts, constructs, and principles. So without the theory, everything is scattered on the table. You don't know what would be a very good explanation when it comes to the phenomenon that you're looking into. Also, it guides us to discovering facts. There are a lot of facts that needs to be uncovered. Okay? And it is the theory that would help us. What fact do I need to look into? Oftentimes, you know that there is a problem, You know that the behavior is the problem. However, what's affecting this behavior can be answered by your theory. It also helps us identify the gap that need to be investigated. In addition, it would stimulate research in areas that would warrant study. For example, there are a lot of nursing theories. Let's take, for example, Roy's adaptation theory. We know that an individual, when exposed to stress, would adapt to it. But what are the factors leading to that adaptation? What are the factors that would lead into transcultural nursing interventions? What are the possible variables that's affecting the different beliefs of these people? It also connects different studies and it facilitates the interpretation of the larger meaning of research findings. Because oftentimes we are seeing the surface of the result. We are not seeing what is the larger meaning of this research finding. It's the theory that will be able to help us explain this. Now, paradigm or framework. Oftentimes you would hear the word paradigm and then you'll picture out boxes in your research paper which would try to correlate two theories. So when I talk about paradigm, it's a perspective or frame of reference for viewing the social world. Explanations why the problem under study would exist by showing how the variables involved in the problem are related to each other. So your paradigm is a visual representation. It's a visual explanation of how the theories are correlated or how the variables, are connected to one another. Oftentimes, the paradigm would be able to give the reader a glimpse as to what are you embarking on. Your paradigm will be able to give the reader an explanation as to what would you want to attain in your research. It's a useful device of organizing existing data meaningfully, and it can help us interpret, critique, and unify established scientific laws, modifying them in the face of anticipated changes or disruptions. Now, a theoretical paradigm. It is a use of a theory or theories in explaining why a certain phenomenon would exist and how the various factors of which brought about by the phenomenon are intended, as I have emphasized earlier. So when I talk about a theory, it would attempt to show us how the various factors have led to this phenomenon. Oftentimes, for example, in a descriptive research, we would want to know what's happening on the ground. We would want to know what's the present number of cases of COVID, what's the spread of COVID, what is the R naught or reproductive factor of COVID. But behind that, we will be more interested as to what's the reason why COVID is spreading. What are the factors leading to the spread of COVID? So it is the theory that will help us explain what is the reason. If you would go back to the epidemic triangle or the epidemiologic triangle, you would know that there are several factors that need to be considered. So you have the host, okay, you will have also the disease causing organism. Okay, so there are different factors. It also uses abstract concepts. You need to familiarize that when I talk about a theory, it's generalized, it's abstract, whereas a conceptual framework will be more specific. There are instances that these are combinations of abstract and well-defined concepts, but oftentimes when I talk about a theory, it uses abstract concepts. Allow me to go back to the progressivist theory of learning, authored by Gregorio. Gregorio would say that knowledge would lead to attitude and then related to practice. Or he would say that knowledge would be able to influence attitude, and then attitude will be able to influence practice. If you can notice, Gregorio did not say what type of knowledge is he talking about. He did not say what attitude is he talking about. If we're going to apply it in our research, we could say that knowledge about infection could lead to attitude towards prevention and then preventive practices. Or we could say that knowledge about family planning could lead to attitude towards family planning, then later on, family planning practices. That's how we apply a theory in our research. And when I say conceptual paradigm, It would use constructs which are specific or well-defined concept. When we are writing this in our research protocol, you would usually start by saying, in this study, which would signal that this is already the theory being applied in your research. And that's your conceptual paradigm. When you are looking into the conceptual paradigm, you need to explore two sides. What could be the possible reason why knowledge is leading to attitude? We could say that high knowledge could lead to positive attitude because if you have a lot of knowledge, you would know what is more appropriate and not. However, the inverse may also be true. With high knowledge, it could also be possible that an individual will be able to develop a negative attitude. Okay? So when we are looking into the conceptual framework, we need to look at the two sides. That will be the end of your discussion on theoretical and conceptual framework. As a key takeaway, you need to remember that in your research, the theoretical framework is the basis of examining the relationship of the variables under study. You need to pay attention and prepositions which are related to your research undertaking, and later on explain the assumed flow of the variables through your conceptual framework. If you are embarking on a qualitative research, your main focus will be theoretical underpinnings. Okay, these are theories that attempt to explain what is the possible sources of knowledge. Okay, what are the possible sources of knowledge? So there are different theoretical underpinnings for different types of theoretical or qualitative researches. You need to refer to the lecture on qualitative researches to be more specific on that. Once again, thank you for your attention.